Lately, I've been thinking a lot about what does it actually mean to become your higher self, especially as a woman after 50. What does that mean? I think a lot of women, we spend years in survival mode. We spend years trying to survive our own lives. We take care of everyone else. We're carrying responsibilities. We're pushing through exhaustion most of the time. And then one day, especially after you turn 50, you start realizing you don't want to just survive anymore. You don't want to live in survival mode. You want peace. You want alignment. You want confidence. You want purpose. You want to feel connected to yourself again. I started to pay really close attention to what drained me emotionally. This started probably right as soon as I turned 50. And I think one of the biggest shifts for me was realizing how emotionally exhausted and drained I had become. I was constantly giving to a fault. Again, programming, this is the way I was raised, this is what was expected of me, but it's also part of the core of who I am. And my family and my friends, they knew that they could count on me no matter day or time. Just call or text and I am there. But I was overextending myself. I would say yes to everything, every celebration I was invited to. Even if I was double booked, I somehow managed to juggle it all. I was that friend or that family member that I would be the one to arrive early, to help prep, run any errands you needed, and I would stay late to clean up. And I thought, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. I was feeling emotionally depleted in every way. The constant pouring into everyone else with absolutely no time for me left me empty. Running around, fitting it all in, doing all the things, and not a single ounce of it was for me. And I said some of this was self-imposed, but a lot of it was kind of what we were expected to do, or at least I was expected to do. And sharing in those celebrations and being at everything I was invited to, that put me in environments that mentally and emotionally drained me, especially if there was alcohol involved. Even when I was drinking alcohol, it was draining for me. I just didn't realize it at the time. I was too deep in the thick of people pleasing that I didn't even give myself time to process what was actually happening. But as I've gotten older, I've realized, no, I don't need to be around that. No, thank you. Hard pass. And it was time. It was time to let go of that version of me that constantly abandoned herself. How many women walk around on a daily basis, functioning while internally feeling completely exhausted? That was me. That was me for a very long time. And I'm at the place where I am protecting my peace. At some point, I started realizing that protecting my peace, that mattered. That became a heightened priority for me. Protecting my peace instead of proving my worth meant that I did not need to explain myself. I didn't need to defend myself, and I most certainly didn't need to earn my rest. It was time to take care of me. I also learned to do it without zero guilt. No guilt whatsoever. I started taking care of myself from a lens of self-respect instead of feeling guilty. This included everything I was digesting: media, family, friends, food. But it started with giving up alcohol. I then slowly progressed to paying attention to my body, on how I felt after, eating certain foods, because I started to look at food as nourishment for my body, not punishment. I wanted to look at food and see how it could serve me, heal me, and help me. Help me reach my goals, help me feel better, help me heal from the scare of cancer. I looked at food as nourishment, not punishment. My next phase was to take up space. I stopped shrinking myself so that others could feel bigger, especially when I started to heal from my people-pleasing phase. it was okay for me to take up space, especially if the space is in my own home and I wanted to stay in my own home. But bigger than all that, it starts up here, the negative self-talk. And this is something that I really had to work on. Even today, it rears its ugly head. No one is exempt from it. And I learned that what we tell ourselves, it matters. I started with positive affirmations. I started with telling myself the things that I wanted, the job that I wanted, my home, how I wanted it to feel and look, financial abundance. But I spoke about those things as if they already happened. So pay attention to how you speak to yourself. There are a lot of women out there that are carrying years of self-criticism without even realizing it. You kind of heard me talk about it, but I started to take control of my health. I made time for my workouts because they were important to me. Dedicating 1 hour out of the 23 that we get in any given day, that's such a small deposit I was making to my future self. I didn't make any apologies or excuses for it. Movement is health. Strength training is longevity. Sleep is my superpower. I need sleep to heal and recover, which means that rest is approved. Healing from the false idea that I was not enough. As a recovering perfectionist, I would use that as an excuse to constantly keep pushing myself to the point that it would cripple me. It just was never good enough. I had that mentality. This channel is the prime example. For 6 years, I reviewed, I studied, I watched a million videos on how to start a YouTube channel, but I never hit record. I wanted to have all of the equipment before starting this channel. I wanted to have, everything that I needed. And I also felt like I had nothing to talk about. But here I am, only using my iPhone and a cheap $20 tripod that I got from Amazon. I'm using natural light and my voice. It was a healing process. I stopped wanting to fix myself and I started wanting to take care of myself. I wanted to hold myself accountable. And that's not vanity, ladies. Self-care is the highest form of self-respect. And when all of that noise got cleared out, I got very clear alignment. I started to become more honest about what no longer felt aligned. And this was very new territory emotionally for me. This meant that I needed to reanalyze my relationships with family, friends, coworkers, you name it. And the one thing that became clear is that I have zero tolerance for toxicity and drama. And once I realized who those guilty parties were, I had to let them go from my life. They had to, bye-bye. This doesn't mean that I stopped talking to them altogether. It just meant that we couldn't be in the same room or be in the same conversations. I had no tolerance for it. There were quite a few, I will say, that I had to cut ties with completely. And that was primarily due out of mental safety and stability for me. I had to do that for me. And I have no regrets. They served their season in my life, and it was time to move on. Today, I am choosing relationships that to me feel safe, feel supportive, and they're aligned to where I am and where I am going. All of this brings me to healthy habits. I changed my daily habits. I was always an early riser, but my shift was that I woke up with intention. I established really easy and healthy morning and evening routines. Those were very important. I focused on things that moved the needle and helped me get closer to my goals. Starting with the food, I ate cleaner. I became pescatarian. I gave up alcohol 7 years ago. I prioritize my sleep. I work out 5 to 6 days a week. I walk daily. Even sometimes if it's for 15 minutes, I still move my body. I drink more water. I take my vitamins. But I also have a healthy mental hygiene, right? Because I stopped engaging in small talk conversations. I stopped forcing dialogue with people. I got real comfortable with awkward silence. I would say it is one of my strongest flex skills. My husband is completely uncomfortable with it, but I'm here for it. I stopped watching people and things on social media that did not serve me. They may have served a purpose at one point, but they no longer serve me. They no longer fit who I am or where I'm going. They make me feel inferior or smaller. I'm not watching it. I make it a point to only listen and watch things that help me learn, they help me expand, and they help me grow, because I am evolving. I am not staying stuck. And I think that many women, they stay connected to versions of themselves that they've already outgrown. Evolving is okay. Allowing yourself to evolve without guilt is when you understand that growth does not mean you're betraying who you used to be. You can still remember her, but it's time to level up. I learned to stop abandoning myself. It's okay to prioritize you. I learned to stop saying yes when I really meant no. And no is a whole sentence, by the way. All of this brings me to respecting myself. I stopped silencing my needs. I learned to vocalize what they were with no shame, zero guilt, and definitely no apologies. Especially as a mom, as a woman, as a wife, we always want to put everybody first. I also stopped ignoring my intuition. If something was telling me not to go to that party, that event, I simply stopped going. I said no, or I declined. If I got bad vibes from someone, I also learned to stay away from them. I'm not here to try to force people and force connections. I stopped constantly putting myself last. I had to prioritize me. I had a lot of takers, but no givers. And that left me feeling annoyed, aggravated, and a little bit of taken advantage of. But once I put myself first, all of that changed. I learned to listen to my body emotionally, physically, mentally. I paid close attention to how I felt after I ate, how I felt after leaving certain people, places, and things, how I felt after a workout. I gave myself a few seconds to just be in that moment and really focus on, how am I feeling? Does this feel good? Then I realized that becoming my higher self, it wasn't about becoming perfect. It was about finally stopping the ways I kept abandoning myself. It was so enlightening. I want you to understand that confidence, that's built privately first. Confidence does not appear overnight. It begins with rebuilding trust in yourself, right? Keeping the small promises you make to yourself. Staying consistent. Consistent with your discipline. This, I'm telling you, this is where the magic happens. It's in the quiet growth that nobody sees. That's where it happens. Sometimes confidence starts with simply keeping your word to yourself again. Allowing myself to evolve without guilt has been liberating, much like my pixie cut. This is something that may seem shocking or confusing to a lot of people at first when you first start this, and that's okay. This required me to change my priorities. I was a different person, and that meant that I needed different things. I became stronger. I became more focused. I protected my energy at all costs, and it made some people upset, but I didn't need anyone's approval. I think as women, we carry a lot of guilt for evolving. As if becoming more aligned with yourself means that you're hurting other people. You're not hurting anyone. You're actually gaining for yourself. This is my life, and I have earned every ounce of who I am today. I have sacrificed. I have shed tears for this version of me, and I'm not going to apologize for it. I finally realized that my higher self, she's already inside of me. This was such an enlightenment. I felt empowered and grounded. When I realized that, I stopped telling myself to become the best version of myself. I know it's cliche. Instead, I started to say, I don't think our higher self is someone completely different. I have been here all along. Unfortunately, I was just hidden and tucked away, but I'm here now. I think she's the version of us underneath all of that exhaustion, underneath the survival mode, underneath the years of putting ourselves last. She is way dug deep inside of that. And maybe this stage of life is finally about meeting her. That version of you that lives unapologetically, that lives grounded, true, honest, with purpose, and the best version of the woman she has always been. That is your emotional payoff, ladies. I think a lot of women are waking up in this stage of life realizing they want more. They want more than just functioning and surviving. And I want that for you. You know, we want peace. We want connection. We want strength. We want purpose. But above all else, we want ourselves. We want to feel like us again. And maybe becoming our higher self isn't about changing who we are. Maybe it's about finally coming home to ourselves. After years of leaving ourselves behind, it's time to meet her again, to welcome her and hug her and love her. Realizing your higher self is not perfection. It's the version of you that finally stops disappearing inside of her own life. Go find her. If this conversation resonated with you, let me know in the comments. I love to hear what part of yourself you're reconnecting with in this season of life. And if you're navigating post-menopause, emotional healing, confidence, strength, and rediscovering yourself after 50, I would so love for you to subscribe and continue this journey with me. I would love to see you and hear from you in the comments. Let's build this community together. Please share this video with a sister, a cousin, a friend, a wife that needs a little motivation. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And until the next one, adios.